Yay. Hello and good evening. My name is Regine Reyes and I use they and she pronouns.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Mendoza, pronouns they, them. We'll be your hosts for this evening's program.
So thank you for joining us as we commemorate and talk through the latest historic Supreme Court decision in Fulton versus Philadelphia.
We have experts and community leaders from around San Diego who will offer space for our community to come together, identify next steps, and talk through our calls to action.
To begin, we want to honor and respect Native and Indigenous peoples and their land on which San Diego resides. San Diego was built on the territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. We recognize that the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land and that today the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community.
Though we are here today to talk about this Supreme Court case, we don't want to start our program without acknowledging the losses within our own community. Serenity Hollis, Thomas Harden, and E.J. Boykin, aka Nova Watson, are just some of the precious transgender lives we've lost this year. Boykin's death is at least the 29th violent death of a transgender or gender nonconforming person in 2021. We say at least because too often these deaths go unreported or misreported.
The lives of Serenity Hollis, Thomas Harden, and E.J. Boykin, aka Nova Watson, mattered. Black trans lives matter. Black trans lives matter. And Black lives matter. So please join us in a moment of silence to recognize the precious and far too many lives that are lost.
Thank you so much. So for tonight, we have a few group agreements. We encourage you to engage in the comments section of Facebook and YouTube. Although we won't be answering any questions live, we will have members of our team who will do their best to answer questions as they come in. Remember to communicate with courtesy and respect, and to please refrain from any rhetoric that is transphobic, anti-Black, or racist. Hate will not be tolerated.
In terms of accessibility, ASL interpretation will be available throughout tonight's rally. And thank you to our wonderful interpreter, Suzanne, hello, who will be with us tonight. And the agenda for tonight will include a welcome, a legal perspective from ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties and Lambda Legal, a faith leader representative, community representative, social services perspective of how this impacts and affects San Diego programs and services, a call to action, and our next steps.
So before we introduce our first speaker, I want to thank all of the organizations involved with planning tonight's program. ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties, Connor Maddox, Equality Business Alliance, North County LGBTQ Resource Center, PFLAG San Diego, Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest, Lambda Legal.
We'd also like to thank Capi Meta Coalition, the San Diego Black LGBTQ Plus Coalition, the San Diego LGBTQ Latinx Coalition, San Diego Pride, the Stonewall Citizens Patrol, the San Diego LGBT Community Center, and Trans Family Support Services.
So for our first speaker, and to give you a welcome, is Chief Executive Officer of the San Diego LGBT Community Center, Kara Desert. Hi, Kara.
I'm Kara Desert. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm proud to be the CEO of your San Diego LGBT Community Center. We know that every child deserves a safe and loving home, especially foster children who have already experienced hardships and some neglect and abuse, who are in desperate need of a loving family. At the center, we have clients who are LGBTQ youth placed in foster care only to be rejected by the family when they learn that the youth is LGBTQ. It is heartbreaking for a young person to have to leave a foster care placement, sometimes in the middle of the night, because who they are and or who they love. Yet we know this happens and continues to happen right here in San Diego and across our nation. LGBTQ families know the struggles and the pain of being an LGBTQ youth and are uniquely qualified to be the loving parents that these youth so desperately need. Because same-sex couples are 6 times more likely to be foster parents, we must open the doors wider for even more loving homes for all youth who don't have them. To fight for this better world, last August, the Center joined Lambda Legal's amicus brief to the United States Supreme Court, along with 26 other LGBTQ youth-serving partners across the nation, to urge the court to uphold the rights of LGBTQ parents to foster children. We are relieved that this decision does not recognize a license to discriminate or a general right for religious organizations to violate non-discrimination laws. Opponents of our equality have long been seeking to undo hard-won non-discrimination protections, and for the second time in 4 years, the court has declined to do so. This is great news for all people who are protected from non-discrimination laws. But the hard news is that this nuanced decision doesn't tell our incredible LGBTQ community that we are seen, valued, and welcomed, that we deserve to be parents just like any other loving family, and that we deserve the same rights as all Americans. Every year, it seems, our rights are up for debate at the Supreme Court, even as LGBTQ Americans continue to face discrimination and health disparities. This ruling comes to us during National Pride Month, a month when we celebrate our beautiful and diverse LGBTQ community, where we celebrate the Stonewall riots as the beginning of our fight for our equality, our humanity, and our dignity, when we stood up to say no more to oppression, discrimination, and violence. And today, we pledge as a community to continue that fight until all people, including our transgender and non-binary community, immigrants, our BIPOC community, and all our families have equal rights and equal justice. The Center, with our partners, we are all committed to serving and advocating for the full diversity of this community, including our amazing families who have fought for decades to exist and to be protected like other loving families. And to that end, we call on Congress to pass the Equality Act and the John Lewis Every Child Deserves a Family Act, so that no one faces discrimination for being who they are. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being committed to this continued fight.
Thank you so much, Kara.
So to provide a legal perspective, I'd like to introduce Melissa De Leon, who is an equity staff attorney at ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties, and Richard Segal, a National Leadership Council member of Lambda Legal.
Thank you very much, Regina and Ben. My name is Rich Segal. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I am, as they mentioned, a member of the National Leadership Council of Lambda Legal. I live here in San Diego. And I'd like to talk about the case that just was decided by the Supreme Court yesterday for a little while. Then I'll hand it over to Melissa to speak about its implications. We all live in a country where we believe, and as it should be, that laws apply to everyone equally, and that people are not entitled to decide that they just don't want to be subject to a particular law just because of that they don't believe it's a good idea, or that, whether that's based on their own personal philosophy or based on their religious background. That's why, for example, you can still be arrested for dealing or taking drugs, even if your religion says you should take them. You can still be arrested for hurting someone, even if your religion says that certain types of sacrifice are permissible. You can still be held in violation of a law if you discriminate against someone, even if your religion says that that's okay. And that's the type of society that we want to live in, because the same rules have to apply to everyone. And as recently as 30 years ago, there was a question about that. But 30 years ago in 1990, 31 years ago in 1990, the Supreme Court of the United States decided a case called Employment Division versus Smith, in which the court was asked whether a Native American tribal practice involving particular substance that was banned by federal law should be allowed to that group of people because they have a religious tradition of using it. And the Supreme Court, in an opinion written by Justice Scalia, one of the most conservative justices that we've had on the court in many decades, held that a law of general application that is both neutral and applies to everyone will still be applicable regardless of whether someone's religious beliefs say that they, what is prohibited they can do, or what is, or what is allowed they can't do. So as long as the law is neutral and generally applicable, generally you don't get a religious exemption from that law. So, and that's as it should be. So fast forward to several years ago into the city of Philadelphia, where the city had a policy with regard to its foster care system that any organization that was working in the foster care system was not allowed to discriminate against parents based on their sexual orientation. So, when the city of Philadelphia entered into a contract with an organization, that organization had to agree that they would not discriminate in the placements against gay or lesbian couples or other sexual minorities. Catholic Social Services was a large foster care placement organization, and they felt that that was a burden on their religious beliefs against placing children with same-sex couples as foster parents. So they brought a lawsuit claiming that it was a violation of their constitutional right to free exercise of religion by being required to place children with same-sex couples as foster parents. The district court denied their claim, and the Court of Appeals denied their claim, both based on the Smith case, saying, no, it's a law of general application. Just because you have a religious belief that is contrary to that doesn't mean that you get an exemption from that. But the Supreme Court granted review and asked the question, should the Smith case be overruled? Should there be religious exemptions to rules of general application? Now that can have incredible legal implications particularly for members of minority groups who are protected in many cases in state and federal levels by anti-discrimination laws. Can someone who is normally be prohibited from discriminating against someone on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity be able to hold a Bible in his or her hand and say, now I get a free pass, I get a get out of jail free card because it's based on a religious belief? So in the Fulton case, the Supreme Court yesterday came to a very interesting decision that essentially was dodging a bullet from our perspective, because there were people who were advocating that you should have a religious-based exemption from civil rights laws. The Supreme Court did something interesting in that they ruled 9-0 in favor of Catholic Social Services, saying that Catholic Social Services' rights to free exercise of religion were violated, but they maintained the rule of Smith intact, because what they found was that the rule, the contract between Catholic Social Services and the city said that you are not supposed to discriminate in this way unless we give you an exemption. And what they held was that because there was this release valve in the contract, that the commissioner was able to grant an exemption, that it wasn't therefore a rule that applied to everyone. It was a rule that applied to everyone unless the commissioner said so. And therefore the Smith case didn't apply. And in looking at the actual opinions, 6 of the 9 justices endorsed the continued validity of the Smith decision, which is vitally important to us. But there are 3 justices out there who think that the Smith decision should be reconsidered. So Catholic Social Services won their case, but the legal implication for minority communities such as the LGBTQ plus community is that the Smith decision remains intact, and the attack on civil rights laws that could have been posed by a religious exemption was set aside by the Supreme Court. And for the implications of that, I'll turn it over now to Melissa from the ACLU.
Thank you, Rich. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa DeLeon. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the equity staff attorney at the ACLU of San Diego and Imperial Counties. And I'll be brief because I think and agree with Rich and everything you said in that really excellent and thorough summary of the legal background. And just to reiterate, the bottom line here is that the court, and very importantly, did not recognize a constitutional or legal license to discriminate based on religious beliefs, which is what the defendants or the opponents were asking for in this case. And what that means here in San Diego and everywhere, to be very clear, is that governments may continue to enforce laws protecting LGBTQ people and others from discrimination so long as they do so even-handedly. And what this decision did not do is that the decision does not authorize discrimination in taxpayer-funded government programs, including and such as foster care, but also including healthcare or disaster relief programs and homeless shelters. And so all levels of government, federal, state, and local governments can and should continue to pass and enforce comprehensive non-discrimination laws. This is critical given the high rates of discrimination experienced by the LGBTQ community, and especially, as we know, by Black and Brown transgender women. And so what's up next? Congress must listen to an overwhelming majority of voters and pass the Equality Act to update our civil rights laws and ensure explicit protections from discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And what this would do is, in addition to ensuring explicit protections for the LGBT community, the Equality Act would update federal civil rights laws to provide protection for all women, for people of color, and LGBTQ people in areas such as access to transportation and transportation services, taxpayer-funded programs, and retail stores. And so we, the people, must demand that Congress act and pass the Equality Act now. Thank you.
Much, Rich and Melissa definitely helped me understand all of the implications of the decision that was passed. Something else, in including the legal perspective, we thought was important to include was a faith leader perspective. And for that, we have Reverend Corey Pasiniak from Mary Magdalene Apostle Catholic Community here to talk to us a little bit.
Thank you. I'm Reverend Corey Pasiniak. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the priest and pastor of Mary Magdalene Apostle Catholic Community in San Diego. And I'm also co-chair of San Diego Pride's Devout Interfaith Coalition. As a transgender queer Catholic leader, I'm disappointed by yesterday's Supreme Court decision, which hurts LGBTQ plus families and people of faith. This decision harms those Catholic LGBTQ plus couples in Philadelphia longing to provide a loving home to children in the foster care system. Religious freedom is a fundamental American right enshrined in our Constitution, but it is not and should not be the right to discriminate. For people of faith, our faith is often what motivates and inspires us to help one another and work for justice. The freedom to practice our faith is not globally guaranteed, but that freedom should not mean that we discriminate against those who do not share our beliefs. That freedom should not mean that we decide a couple cannot become a foster family simply because of who they love. We believe that religious identity and faith beliefs are not a license to discriminate, but rather an invitation to love and to serve, acknowledging that most people of faith support non-discrimination protections enshrined in our laws. We need to remind our religious and secular leaders that there are LGBTQ people of faith, that we are a vital, integral, and sacred part of various faith communities across the spectrum. We need to remind our religious and secular leaders that LGBTQ persons are created in the image of God, that LGBTQ plus families are more than capable of creating loving, supporting families. And for those of us who are familiar with the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, we can turn to a passage from Micah. And what does God require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. So let us act justly and continue the fight and the work to end LGBTQ plus discrimination in our faith communities and in our institutions. Thank you.
We have a community member perspective from Dr. Kafele Khalfani. Dr. Kafele Khalfani is the Dean of Student Affairs over at Warren College at UC San Diego and the board co-chair for the San Diego LGBT Community Center. Hello.
Hello, thank you. So yes, I am Kafele Khalfani. In addition to all of those other things, I'm also both an adoptive and a foster parent here in San Diego. And when the decision came out, I was hopeful that it would sort of go the other way, but I'm not surprised again that discrimination couched in religious freedom still exists. But when I look back like 6 years ago, when I went through the process of becoming a foster parent, I was first licensed in New York, and then I also received my license here when I moved to California. And in both of those cases, I was lucky enough to be in environments and working with agencies where my identity as a single Black gay male was both celebrated and appreciated. So throughout my training to achieve my licensure, both agencies were making sure that parents were ready to accept children in ways that were inclusive of their identities of being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. We had a number of trainings to prepare parents to welcome and accept their kids if they should come out as LGBT. And in fact, I even led one of those trainings. As a child in foster care, there are a number of issues that you're going to have to deal with, including issues related to your traumas from parental separation, mental and physical abuse, neglect, many other issues. Your sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression should be the least of your concerns, and it should be the least concern of the person who's parenting you. As we know, when LGBT folks enter into this, they're ready to be parents. They're prepared, they're excited, they go through the work to do this. And to discriminate based off of that identity, that's not good enough. There's a number of different reasons to say no to us, but who we love and how we express ourselves is not one of those reasons. We want to make sure, though, that while this is disappointing, we also are in America and competition reigns supreme. So we look for opportunities for folks who are interested in being foster or adoptive parents to still go through that process, to make sure that you find agencies that will be supportive of you and that will embrace and celebrate your identities. So if you're interested in doing that, I encourage you to reach out to both county and private agencies that are supportive of LGBT kids, because there are a lot of kids out there that need a home, and we don't want this to be a reason for folks not to be able to enter the process. If you can't foster, because I know that is a big commitment, there are also options including being a mentor, being a court-appointed special advocate, or finding some other ways to be able to support programs that support kids in foster care. Because I know as an LGBT parent that we're pretty good at what we do. That kids that are raised by LGBT parents have just as many great outcomes, if not more. And we want people to continue to be parents and to do that and to not let this sort of deter you from that. Hopefully, it will encourage some more people to step up and to open their homes to kids, because we also know that LGBT kids face higher levels of homelessness and other types of abuse when they're not allowed to stay in a stable home, or they don't have a stable home. So I encourage you all to get back out there and to continue to fight the fight. So talk to your local representatives to bring in more laws about equality and to continue to open your homes and your hearts to kids in foster care. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalfani. Open your hearts, open your homes. I love that. Next up, for our social services perspective, we have Leah Pronovo, case manager over at Unicorn Homes.
Hi, my name is Leah Pronovo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the case manager at Unicorn Homes, which is a host homes program at North County LGBTQ Resource Center in Oceanside. We host LGBTQ youth ages 14 to 25, typically before they get into the foster care system. this ruling yesterday, even though it's a narrow ruling in favor of Catholic social services, my personal opinion is it's still kind of a slippery slope, opening up to the possibilities of more emboldened lawsuits, trying to carve out more loopholes within our LGBTQ rights. From the standpoint of a social services, as we all know, or in my opinion, once again, the foster care system does have cracks that kids and youth fall through. So in ways it's broken, and continues to be broken. This rule showing us how, it just shows how much work still needs to be done within the foster care system. When a suffering youth is actually left behind in a group home because of somebody's religious rights or religious beliefs, not in allowing a person to take that youth in, it just boggles my mind. I just really think that so-called religious freedoms of an organization should take a backseat within our foster system, so that the youth's care is first and foremost. It really troubles me, though, that how much money was actually spent by both the city and Catholic Social Services to bring this case to the Supreme Justices and have them make this decision. I have to think of what other ways could that money have been used in order to help the youth, at least there in Philadelphia. The other thing that bothered me about this case was the Catholic Social Services said they wanted to continue what they've been doing in the past for the youth, that they've been doing this for 50 plus years. The only thing I can actually think of is if they've been doing it for that long, aren't they part of the problem, at least partially, in allowing the system to be broken? So I do have some hopes moving forward, given this particular decision. My hopes are that cities and counties and states take a good look at their internal process of giving contracts to organizations like this. And by doing so, they will see and understand that there are other organizations out there that can offer better services that are not going to follow discriminatory practices. And they, by doing so, they won't expand upon the trauma that these youth within the foster care system actually experience. So my other hope is that they start to actually look at alternative solutions within smaller organizations. One of the things that I'd like to point out is this program, Unicorn Homes, which is a host homes program, has been around since its inception, almost 3 full years. And since we started this program, I've looked around the country. These types of programs are popping up all over the country, mainly because there is a need for them to be able to step in before the foster system is even needed. So I hope that our cities and counties can look at organizations like this, host home programs, all over the country, and help to expand and grow those organizations. I know myself as a taxpayer, Um, I don't want to see my money going into an organization that does social services that would actually probably tell me as a trans woman that I'm not fit to guide and help a youth that's in need. So I hope that in the future, they will spread the taxpayer money around to other organizations throughout the country. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that perspective where it's really centering trauma-informed care and like youth, like the joyfulness and also the health of youth. Next up, we have a call to action. So I'd like to introduce Jen La Barbera, the Education and Advocacy Manager at San Diego Pride, and Max Desposti, the Executive Director at North County LGBTQ Resource Center.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to be here. And after all this coming together today, hi, Jen. So good to see you as well. Hi, Suzanne. Always amazing. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today, to really coming together to lay the groundwork. And now it's actually our privilege, Jen and I, and our honor to close this out with a call to action. And what that means is that the decision that came from the Supreme Court, we heard that could have been worse, but at the same time, it's definitely not a decision that, has troubled our community. But also it kind of like opened the way for the path forward for our LGBT community on what's next and what our movements and leaderships needs to focus on. Just let's think about the fact that it's 2021 still, and there are still 29 states, folks, in the country that lack comprehensive protections for LGBTQ people. That's a lot of states. That's the majority of states. And we are often here in California, sleeping on the ground of complacency, a false security. But the reality is that we are not an island. We're affected and infected by this surge of, even conversation around our own rights that trigger our youth and our communities all the time. So even though we have statewide protections here in California, the fact that over half of the states does not, it just can be accepted. And it does have an impact on us and in the work we do. That's why we need the Equality Act, as has been said. And I know Jen is going to speak more about it.
I am. So the Equality Act, Melissa talked a little bit about it. A bunch of our other speakers have already talked a little bit about the Equality Act. So it's a piece of legislation that would amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You see the link in the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and go to equalitytime.org. It has a great explainer of everything that the Equality Act means. But ultimately, it would prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity across the board. That is, in employment, in housing, public accommodations, education, federally funded programs, credit, and jury service, right? Pretty much across the board. So the inequalities that were laid bare by the Fulton case, specifically here, the ability of this one particular social service agency in Philadelphia to continue to discriminate against same-sex couples, would actually be mitigated by passing the Equality Act.
That's wonderful, Jen. Thank you for going over that. And just for clarity, obviously, like it is true for any law that we pass out there, doesn't mean that our work will be done, right? Doesn't mean that the passing of the Equality Act will get rid of homophobia, transphobia, and hate all over against our LGBTQI community and people. But the reality is that most of this work needs to happen from all of us. I remember the marriage equality battles, right? It's about conversation changing the hearts and minds of people. It's about introducing this conversation with our uncles, with our family members, our friends in our communities, our churches, and also within the same service providers, right? Leah was referring to this really challenge, even this emotional toll that we are all taking. So having this conversation with a law that has passed, the Equality Act, will set the ground rules about where to start and where to go to educate people. So I think that's really important for us to make sure that we send clarity that the work of against transphobia, homophobia, and hate, it's the arch of justice that we always refer to, but it's definitely a great point to start. And that's why our call to action is something that really care, is something that we bring to your homes today and to all of you starting now.
Yeah, and to be clear, right? So yes, have those conversations with your homophobic, racist uncle, have those conversations at work. But also with the Equality Act, it's not a partisan issue. It's not a difficult issue. Surveys show that most Americans believe that LGBTQIA people already have these protections under the law, but we don't, right? Those 29 states across the country that don't have these comprehensive protections, that's over half of our country. So here's the second part of our call to action. As an individual, you yourself can sign on in support of the Equality Act. You see that link on the bottom of our screen here. And while that is an sdpride.org link, that is a coalition link, right? All of these organizations that have put together this rally here today, all of these stakeholders around the county, all of us that are doing this work on the Equality Act will be able to engage and activate our folks through whoever signs up at that sign up link. So that's individual, right? But we also want you to take this issue up with your faith institutions, with your businesses, your elected officials, and ask them to sign on in support of the Equality Act. It is currently sitting in the US Senate. It is not passed, and we are being basically filibustered and unable to pass it in the Senate. So, great, our House has passed it, our House of Representatives. So we need to exert that pressure on our senators. We need to exert that pressure through our businesses, through our faith institutions. Tell them that it is past time for LGBTQ people to be treated equally under the law, right? So you can sign on as an individual or as an organization at sdpride.org/Equality Act. And we will continue to keep in touch with you on how to get there, right? Like, we will get there. Our movement has done so many amazing things just in the past 50-something years. We are going to do so many more amazing things, and it is past time for us to pass the Equality Act.
Totally. Thank you, Jen. I just signed up myself.
What a treat to get to do a call to action with you. All right.
Likewise.
Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen and Max. It's great having you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our program. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to the planning committee. And thank you to my wonderful host, Regine, for really being here tonight for the community. And to everyone watching, just some last words. You are valid, you're loved, and you are enough. Thank you and good night.